the recent Shang-Chi events, I decided to dust off a copy of my all-time favorite movie and watch it. I have not watched Shang-Chi. I've heard conflicting things about the movie from various different people. For instance, I've heard that it's wonderful and awesome. I've heard that it's decent, not great, but decent. And I've heard that it's woke trash. Normally, I'd make up my own mind about a piece of entertainment. However, I have to state that I will not be watching this movie. The statements of the lead actor, Simu Liu, in the weeks leading up to the release of the movie completely turned me off to it, as well as the way he's acted since. This is a man who was basically an unknown before being cast in this movie. I know that he was on Kim's Convenience, which I thought was a pretty funny show, but he wasn't some big-name actor. In general, that's fine. All big-name actors or actresses were at one point in time relative unknowns. Bruce Willis, for instance, wasn't a known actor, especially for action movies, before he was cast in Die Hard. So it wasn't his unknown status that turned me off to him. No. It was his unironic claims of being the first Asian hero, the first role model kids like him had to look up to. A small man seeming to forget about the literal decades of Asian heroes in films, lighting up his virtue signal as brightly as he could, while propping himself up on the backs of the far greater men and women who came before him, including two of his very own co-stars, by the way, Michelle Yeoh and Tony Leung.
It'd be funny if it weren't so pathetic. No, what the heck, I'll laugh anyway.
So, as I stated, I decided that I would watch what has become a cult classic, if not an actual one, by dusting off one of my 3 copies of The Crow, in order that I might watch a real Asian hero, the late, great Brandon Lee. Yes, I know he's half Asian, son of the also late and spectacular Bruce Lee. As I also stated previously, this is by far my all-time favorite movie. I don't own multiple copies of any other movie, even my other favorites. I own this title on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray, basically showcasing the different eras in which I purchased said copies. I've always been very into movies like this one, movies that tend toward the darker and more gothic aesthetic. My earliest remembered favorites being Clash of the Titans, the original from 1981, and The Lost Boys, again the original with Kiefer Sutherland. Growing up, I also loved anything and everything by Tim Burton, and have continued to do so. Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was superior to the 70s one for 2 reasons: Johnny Depp, and that it stayed true to the source material in Roald Dahl's book, I Will Die on That Hill. I remember desperately wanting to see The Crow after seeing the movie posters hanging up above the little video rental place in my grocery store, and after seeing the trailers, I knew I needed to. Once I actually watched the movie, I fell in love and have never stopped loving it since. It's one of the few movies that I can watch over and over again and just never get tired of it. So I watched it last night just to sort of refresh myself on it again. I hadn't watched it for a few years because I wanted to watch it with someone else, and I wanted to come at it again with sort of fresh eyes. So I'd been putting off watching it again for quite a while. Then I decided that I wanted to start kind of doing a weekly movie review of older movies, and I figured why the hell not start off with my favorite movie, especially since it stars a lead actor in a more heroic role of East Asian descent, right? So, for those uninitiated, The Crow is based on a graphic novel by James O'Barr. The movie is not a direct translation of the comic, but the basic storyline and concepts remain mostly the same. A young man and his fiancée are killed in a senseless crime by a gang of criminals. A year later, the young man is brought back to life by the Crow, in order to seek revenge on those that killed him and the woman he loved, or, as the movie puts it, to put the wrong things right. Over the course of the movie, the young man, Eric Draven, played phenomenally by Brandon Lee, is guided on his quest by the Crow, and one by one he confronts the thugs that killed him. He also meets up with a younger girl he knew from his life and the cop that investigated his death. Played again awesomely by Ernie Hudson. If you don't know who Ernie Hudson is, I'm sorry for you, and Google is a thing. Eventually, he comes into contact with Top Dollar, the gang boss that orchestrated the events of his and Shelley's deaths, and there's a big climactic fight on a church roof, and it's awesome, and Top Dollar winds up dead. Don't even try to bitch at me about spoilers. The movie is nearly 30 years old. I don't care. Should have watched it by now. Now, I love everything about this movie. I love the tone, I love the set pieces, I love the characters. There's action. Brandon Lee even performs one of the stunts his dad did in Enter the Dragon, and it's fucking awesome. There's a great big fight scene right near the climax of the movie where Brandon really got to show what he was capable of, and it's one of the best action scenes in cinema, in my opinion. The way he confronts each of the gang members is interesting and filled with pathos, since each of those individual scenes is intercut with flashes from his and Shelley's deaths. There's also really emotional scenes between him and the young girl Sarah, and him and Albrecht, the cop. Each of the flashback scenes between Eric and Shelley are beautiful, and were filmed in a sort of monochromatic way that, to me, just adds to the pathos of these scenes. Throughout, the film uses very monochromatic tones and colors that add to that heavy sense of ennui and despair, but brightens up the lighting and colors at certain key moments and scenes when there needs to be more emotional depth and humanness, I suppose. I can't think of the word I want. To me, though, despite the action, despite the undead, revenge of ghost plot, this film is very much a love story. It's dark, it's gritty, it's bloody, but at its heart is a story of devotion and love so strong that it defies one of the fundamental powers of creation. At least that's always been my take on it. Another thing that I find cool about this film is that the original creator, James O'Barr, actually consulted on the movie. Apparently, he was not really happy at first with the choice to cast Brandon Lee as Eric because he wanted Johnny Depp. Now, that would have been fucking amazeballs, but Brandon was seriously perfectly cast for this role, and had that incredibly unfortunate incident not happened, I think he would have done great things. However, O'Barr relaxed after he met Brandon and talked to him, and found out that Brandon could actually quote lines from his book. I found that to be really kind of cool and interesting. Another really beautiful moment in the film is the last scene they filmed with Brandon before the accident. It was a small scene with a bunch of kids dressed up for Halloween, running around him and giggling and being kids. And it just looks like Brandon is genuinely happy and having fun with it. He's laughing, smiling, all that, and they deliberately slowed that scene down to linger on it for a few seconds more, just as a sort of goodbye to him. And it just makes it a really fucking powerful and beautiful scene. Now, if there are any flaws really to the film, I think that there are a few places where it kind of slows down a bit. Particularly in the parts where he's just interacting with people like Albrecht or Sarah, or when it's in the scenes where the other characters are interacting with each other. It just kind of slows down a bit. It's not bad at all. However, if I was being very nitpicky and had to pick something, that's the nit I choose to pick. Otherwise, the film's phenomenal, in my opinion. It's truly a beautiful film. There's a reason the fan base for this film is so very rabid about it. On that note, before parting, I want to state that a remake of this film never needs to happen fucking ever. Not only does this film still stand the test of time, but they just fuck it up anyway. There are a plethora of other Crow graphic novels that these Hollywood fucks can draw from. There's one about a native kid who gets killed just after the Civil War and comes back 100 years later to take revenge on their descendants. It's a good book, I've read it. There's one about a woman who comes back to get revenge on the psychos who kill her and her unborn kid. Again, good book, I've read it. There are plenty of other Crow books to source from. The Hollywood fucks don't need to redo this one. Not only is it just a trash idea, but it's completely and utterly disrespectful to Brandon Lee and his memory. This man literally gave his life for this movie. This was his last film. You fuckos don't need to touch it. Period. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one. If you all enjoyed it, maybe you'll think about liking, sharing, and subscribing. Maybe leaving a little comment down there telling me how much you love my work and I'm your God Emperor. Hopefully I have earned your subscription though. On a more serious note, see you on the next video. Peace.